Namaskar. Good evening to all of you. So today we are continuing our study on the Mahatma letters. Our speaker of the day, Sister Vibha Saxena, she has been conducting this Mahatma letter study. Most of the letters she has been explaining so far. So before she starts the content and the explanation of the letters allotted for the day today, I would request all of you to join me in the universal invocation, followed by a couple of seconds silence. Then Vivaji will continue. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other. Come back. So today we will do the letter number 83, 84, 85, 86 and 87. Part 1 of the session for all these letters. Vivaji will continue again in next week as a part 2 or maybe the ending part. The format is she will explain letter wise. Afterwards, we will have a translation by Sister Meenakshi. And if time permits, we would have brief question answers. Right, Vivaji?
Yes.
Okay, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Subralina, for introducing me and for this beginning of the session. And namaste and good evening to all of you. Very warm welcome to you. So we are here once again to begin this Mahatma letters. And we are taking letter number 83 to 87. So the letters in the beginning, 83, 84, they are relatively short. But the letter 85 is a very important one. So we will take longer in that. We'll try to complete this study in session of 3 or 4 sessions. So I would like to share my screen to show you the slides. Okay. Okay, so we'll begin with letter number 83. Now, as we have already seen in some of the previous letters, the events that were happening around this time, 1882, middle of 1882 towards the autumn of 1882. So this particular letter, it has been written by Jwalkul. It has been written by Jwalkul to AP Senate in August 1882. And this letter, it's a continuation of all those events that were happening around that time. The teachings given by the masters, they were being incorrectly understood. They were misinterpreted by some members, and accusations were being made upon the masters. And even the founders, HPB and Colonel Olcott, they were being criticized. So let us see what this letter says about it. There is a brief context and background to this letter. Now, a lot of articles were being published in the Theosophist. And masters, because they do not interfere in the karma of any person, so they would allow all the articles to get published. And they say that they had themselves allowed to be known to the outside world about their presence. And therefore, they would allow whatever was written in those articles, which would sometimes be very critical. So this person, Oxley, William Oxley, he was an Englishman who had written a book. The title of the book was philosophy of the spirit. So Jwalkul, he had reviewed this book, and the review had been published in the Theosophist. Now, Oxley, he did not agree with some of the things that were mentioned in the review. And perhaps in retaliation, he wrote an article. And in that article, he mentioned that Mahatma KH visited him astrally 3 times. Now, whatever philosophy he wrote in that, Oxley, it was quite incorrect. And HPB did not want to publish that article. But Mahatma KH, he ordered her that no, she should publish it. Therefore, the article was published. But because it was so incorrect, it would lead the public into more misconceptions. Therefore, it was necessary to have a footnote that would clarify all the misinformation of that article. So this current letter, which we are going to study, it is the same footnote by Jwalkul to Oxley's article. And it was given to HPB in 2 copies. One copy she was supposed to send to Senate. So if Senate wanted to make any updates, he could add. And the other was with HPB. So I did not read the entire context and background. I just explained it to you. We'll read the slides when we begin the letter. So the next slide also, slide number 3, it's about the same thing, the context of this letter. Just like Oxley, frequently many other members, they would claim. Now see, Oxley had claimed in his article that Mahatma KH visited him astrally 3 times. So similarly, frequently many other members would claim that they had some communication with the master, or they received a letter from the master. And the other people, the members or the general public, they had no way of knowing the authenticity of their claim. So later on, Master KH, he devised a method to establish the authenticity of all such claims. If any person says that he has had a communication from the master, so it needs to be authenticated. And for this, the master said that any letter or message which would come from them, come from the masters, it would be preceded by a password containing 3 words. And that password, if it is present, then it would conclusively establish that the message is actually from them. So this method actually, it is published in a later letter, chronological letter number 96. But it is relevant over here, so it is given here in the context and background. And in that letter, master clarifies that mediums, people who act as mediums, or even the spooks who are astral entities, they are the shells, they may write messages in the master's handwriting, and they may pass it on to members, impersonating the master. But members must not be misled if the message is not preceded by the password. He says, Kintan Nalanda Dharani. Then the people, they should know that it is not the master who is communicating this message, and this message is not from the masters. He says, no, it is not me, nor from me. Okay. So this was the context to our letter. And now the actual letter 83, which is the footnote by Jwalkul, it begins from here. He writes in the letter, I am commanded by my beloved master, known in India and the Western lands as Kuthumi Lal Singh, to make in his name the following declaration in answer to a certain statement made by Mr. W. Oxley and sent by him for publication in the Theosophist. This is about the article which Oxley got published in the Theosophist. It is claimed by the said gentleman that my master Kuthumi has thrice visited him by the astral form, and that he had a conversation with Mr. Oxley when, as alleged, he gave the latter certain explanations in reference to astral bodies in general, and the incompetency of his own Mayavi roop to preserve his consciousness simultaneously with the body at both ends of the line. So this is what Oxley wrote in his article, and he asked HPB to publish it. He not only says that Mahatma KH appeared to him 3 times in astral form and conversed with him, he also says that the master told him he could not maintain his consciousness in the physical body and in his Mayavi Roop at the same time. So he is also claiming that this is what Master has told him. Now, HPP did not want to publish this article because whatever philosophy about this astral being Oxley had written in that article, it was absolutely incorrect. And it would neither benefit the public nor it would increase respect for the masters in their eyes. But ultimately it was printed because Master said it must be. And therefore this footnote had to be issued to clarify all those incorrect things. Therefore, my master declares that whomsoever Mr. Oxley may have seen and conversed with at the time described, it was not with Kuthumi, the writer of the letters published in the occult world. Notwithstanding that my master knows the gentleman in question, who once honored him with an autograph letter, thereby giving him the means of making his, meaning Mr. Oxley's, acquaintance, and of sincerely admiring his intuitional powers and Western learning. Yet he has never approached him, whether astrally or otherwise. Nor has he ever had any conversation with Mr. Oxley, least of all one of that nature in which both the subject and predicate, the premise and conclusions are all wrong. So it is very clear from this footnote that Mahatma KH, he knew Mr. Oxley. He had honored him with an autograph letter. Mr. Oxley, Mahatma KH knew Mr. Oxley and he actually admired his intuitional powers and Western learning. But Mahatma Ji had never visited him either personally or in astral form, nor he ever had any conversation with him. So this is clearly affirmed over here. He did not have any conversation. Moreover, the concepts about astral consciousness and Mayavi Roop that Oxley had mentioned, they were totally incorrect. Now, in consequence of these claims, the repetition of which is calculated to lead many of our theosophists into error, my master has determined to issue the following resolution. This is what Joel Kuhl is saying in the footnote. Whatever Mr. Oxley wrote, it would mislead the other members. Therefore, this footnote is being issued. Henceforth, any medium or seer who will feel disposed to claim either to have been visited by, or to have held conversation with, or to have seen my master, will have to substantiate the claim by prefixing his or her statement with 3 secret words, which he, meaning my teacher, will divulge to and leave in the safe keeping of Mr. A.O. Hume and Mr. A.P. Sinnett, the respective President and Vice President of the Eclectic Theosophical Society of Shimla. So this was the arrangement that was made. The password would be known to Sinnett and to Hume. And any other person who claimed to have had a conversation with the master would have to prove it by stating those secret words. Then only his claim would be considered authentic. As long as they do not find these 3 words correctly repeated by a medium or heading a statement to that effect, whether verbal or printed, emanating from him or her, or on his or her behalf, the claim shall be regarded as gratuitous assumption and no notice will be taken of it. If anybody sent an article to be published claiming that masters were the source of this article, but they didn't mention the password, then that article would be disregarded. It would not be published. And to his regret, my master is forced to adopt this step, as unfortunately, of late, such self-deception have become quite frequent and would demand a speedy check. This was the reason why masters had put this password system in place. So you can see even at that time how the human mind works. Either they are self-deceived or they genuinely are trying to claim something which is not true. So to check all those things, this password system was put in place. And the above declaration and statement to be appended as a footnote to Mr. Oxley's published statement. So this is all that is given in letter 83. It was just a method how to prevent spurious claims of contact with the masters. And then we go to the next letter, which is chronological letter 84. It is written by Mahatma KH to AP Senate in late August of 1882. Now this letter 84, it is actually a cover letter for the next one, that is letter 85. And in context of this letter, we should know some things like there was a chela. So this is the context. There was this chela called as Gwala K Dev. He was probably a Tibetan. He was a chela of Master KH, and his mystical name was Darbagiri Nath. So Mahatma KH has many chelas. We can come to know from the letters because the references sometimes come up. So there was another probationary chela called Babaji. Now this Babaji, he was actually a young Maratha Brahmin from South India. And he was very short in stature. That is why masters frequently referred to him as the little man. This person, Babaji, he had joined the staff of the Theosophical Society headquarters in Bombay. And later there arose a mystical connection between this Babaji and Gwala K Dev. So the situation was like this, that Mahatma KH, he wanted to send two chelas to Senate to deliver a package. It was basically the letter 85. So he wanted the chelas to deliver to Senate. One of the chela was Gwala K Dev and the other chela was Chandra Kusho. This person Chandra Kusho, he was also a probationary chela and he was from the Nellore district. This Chandra Kusho is the name given by master to him. His original name was something else. Okay. But what happened during that time, Gwala K Dev, he was in Tibet. Dev was in Tibet at the time and he was undergoing some occult training. Therefore, he was unable to go in his physical body to deliver the package. Now see why it is written he was unable to go in his physical body. Does it mean he can go in his subtle body? Yes. So that was the thing. His physical body, it was being prepared for certain occult work. And it could not allow to be get contaminated. Contaminated how? By the magnetism of the world. If he goes out, so it goes even for us. We keep going to the market, to the office, we keep going to other crowded places. Anywhere we go, there are people around us. And all the magnetism which is emanated by every person, it influences us. So his body, Gwala K Dev, he was being prepared for some occult work. And his physical body, it could not be allowed to get contaminated by the magnetism of the world. That is why he couldn't go in his physical person. So Babaji, and Babaji was a probationary chela. He consented to have Dev use his body for the occasion. That means in his subtle body, Gwala K Dev could use Babaji's physical body. If you remember, this method has also been used on several occasions by the Mahatmas. They helped HPB to write her book Isis Unveiled by this method. Okay. So in actually what happens is, if you read how Isis Unveiled was written, the higher principles of the master, they overshadow the chela. And master can use the chela's physical body to accomplish his work. So in this case, it would be Gwala K Dev's subtle body, which would use Babaji's physical body. Now this would be much to the credit and spiritual benefit of Babaji. It was, however, Dev's mystical name, which was Darbagiri Nath. That was Gwala K Dev's mystical name. But Babaji continued to use the name even after this experience has ended. That means after Gwala K Dev stopped using Babaji's physical body, still Babaji continued to use the name Darbagiri Nath. So this is what caused a mix-up. See, in the future letters, frequently this name is used. And it is difficult to know whether it is really Gwala K Dev or whether it is Babaji. Because when they speak of Darbagiri Nath, We don't know to whom actually it is referring. But Mahatma Ji always refers to him as the little man or my little man. So when he uses the term my little man, he is probably referring to Babaji. Babaji was quite short in stature. Okay. But we do not know whether it was as Gwala Ke Dev or as himself, as Babaji. Now, a little bit more about the other Chela, this person, Chandra Kusho. He was a Tibetan. He had this name, Tibetan name, which was given to him by Mahatma to R. Keshav Pillai. So he was this the police inspector at Nellore. That was his name, R. Keshav Pillai. But when he became a Chela on probation, he was given the Tibetan name Chandra Kusho. And later he lost interest in the Theosophical Society. He did not proceed further. But he received several letters from the Mahatma. And some years later, he handed over all these letters to Olcott. So those letters, they are included in the letters of wisdom in the series 2. Okay. The letters from the Masters of Wisdom, series 2, they are included in that series. And one letter of the Mahatma to Chandra Kusho, it is in connection with this letter number 84. The Mahatma Ji tells him that he is sending Gwala Ke Dev to Shimla and he has to deliver some letters to Senate. Mahatma Ji says that Senate is the best. That is how he refers to Senate. Best in the sense, perhaps his intuition is unfolded to such a level that he is ready to receive these teachings. So in that sense, he is the best. And Mahatma Ji says that Chandra Kusho is to accompany Gwala Ke Dev. And he says the task is easy. They don't have to do anything much, except they should be silent and successfully play their parts. Then Mahatma Ji promises him that if he carries out his mission successfully, then he, meaning KH, will take him under his special protection and permit some of the secrets to be taught to him. Undoubtedly, the mission was to deliver letter number 84 and 85A and 85B. See what the Mahatma Ji has promised him, that there will not be much for either to do but be silent and successfully play the parts. And once that mission is done successfully, Mahatma Ji will take him under his special protection and permit some of the secrets to be taught to him. See, this is experienced even otherwise also in the Theosophical Society. I don't know, many of you are long-standing members and have been working very diligently for the society. If we work wholeheartedly and selflessly for TS and the cause of TS, then sometimes we find even in our personal experience, some situation that is there, our personal situation or some worry or any other thing in our life, it seems to get resolved by itself. There could be several reasons, no doubt, but is it not possible that the master has looked out for you and protected you? That is a very real reason. Okay, so this is a thing to introspect. Anyway, so let's move further. I don't know how these marks are coming on my slide. Just 1 minute. I'll share the slides again. Okay, so we are now moving to slide number 12. So from here, we begin this letter number 84. Now in this, Mahatma Ji writes, "My dear friend, the present will be delivered at your house by Darbagiri Nath, a young Chela of mine, and his brother Chela, Chandra Kusho. They are forbidden to enter anyone's house without being invited to do so." So these are some of the rules which the Chelas have to follow. not to enter anyone's house. Therefore, I pray you to pardon our savage customs, because in the eyes of the Western society, our customs of the Eastern society were considered very uncouth. They were uncultured. Okay, so I pray you to pardon our savage customs and at the same time to humor them by sending them an invitation in your name. Either now, if you can receive them privately and without risking their meeting at your place with any stranger or at any other time during the evening or late at night. So Mahatma Ji makes an allowance that although chelas are forbidden to enter the house, still Sinet could invite them on the condition that if he could meet them privately at home with no strangers intervening during their meeting and also later in the evening or at night. Okay. He says, I have not the slightest objection to Mrs. S, meaning Mrs. Sinet, your lady, seeing either of them, but I pray her not to address them, since they are forbidden by our religious laws to speak with any lady, their mothers and sisters excepted, and that she would otherwise greatly embarrass them. So this is also a tradition which is followed in some religious orders when someone takes sannyas. Okay, then now here also the chelas were supposed to follow this discipline, not to enter anybody's house, not to speak to others unnecessarily, not to speak to women other than their mother or sister. So Mahatma Ji says, I pray her to do so in my name and for my sake. So please, she should not try and speak to them. I trust also to your friendship that none but you will speak with them. So Master is very firm that none other than Sinet should speak to the chelas. They have their mission and beyond that they must not go. And what is their mission? First, to deliver into your hands my answer to the famous contradictions. Okay. The members had accused masters of so many contradictions, so the answers that had to be delivered. And second, to interview Mr. Fern. If you remember, Mr. Fern was secretary of Hume and he was being tested for chelaship. So this was the mission which was entrusted to Dev and Chandrakusho. They were instructed to remain silent and play their parts and not unnecessarily mingle with anyone. Now, if Sinet had an answer for the master, if he had to send a reply, if you have an answer for me, Darbagiri Nath will come for it whenever you are ready. I also entreat you most earnestly not to inflict upon them Mr. Hume. Do not think of what has happened until everything is explained. So now the letters, instead of being precipitated, they had to be sent through chelas. And that is why Sinet's reply would have to be taken by Darbagiri Nath. That is what Master is saying. But he specifically did not want Hume to interact with the two chelas. And then he also adds a postscript in the letter. He says they are also forbidden to shake hands with any man or woman, that is to touch anybody. But you can invite my little man to come and talk with you as much as you like, provided you are discreet. Okay. So see, there are many such rules which are prescribed for chelas once they are treading on that path to adeptship, that not to talk, not to touch, not to enter homes. And because they are yet novice, they are new chelas. So they are novice and they are progressing on the path to adeptship. So they have to be protected. Their magnetism needs to be protected. And many such rules apply to them. They must protect themselves from this animal magnetism of the common man, which becomes a real obstacle in their advancement. So I think even Annie Besant was advised by Mahatma K.H. She was asked to carry her own utensils in which she ate food. She was the chela of Mahatma K.H. So, but Mahatma K.H. he allowed Sinet the liberty of inviting and conversing with my little man, that is Babaji, as many times as he liked. Because once this mission would get over of delivering the package, then little man would no longer be Gwala Ke Deb. he would become Babaji once again. Okay, Gwala Ke Dev was going to use the physical body only for this particular mission. So that is all which is given in this letter 84, that my chelas will come to deliver you a package and please follow this and this rule. That was all that was written in 84. Next, we come to the letter 85A and 85B. So this was the letter which was given as a package, which these chelas, Gwala Ke Dev and Kusho, Chandra Kusho, they had to deliver. Okay. Now, in this letter, okay, there are two parts in this letter. Letter number 84A, sorry. Yes. So in this letter 84A, this delivery, which was to be given to Senate by two chelas, we already saw Darbagiri Nath and Chandra Kusho. Now, both A.O. Hume and A.P. Senate, both of them had accused the Mahatmas of contradicting themselves. Mahatma K.H. had asked them on several times to make a list of such items which they thought are contradictory. And Mahatma did not have so much time to search through all the back letters and find out all those points. So Senate finally made that list and then he sent it to Mahatma K.H. sometime earlier. And now Mahatma Ji was replying to it. So this letter 85A, it consists of the item which Senate had made, the contradictory items which he thought were contradictory, and letter 85B, it contains Mahatma's answers. And plus it also has some other comments on some other matters. So let us see what this letter. Okay, now instead of me reading all the questions or all the contradictions from 85A, that will not make any sense. We will take up the one question or one contradiction and the corresponding reply. Okay, so I'm going to begin by the reply letter, the reply which Mahatma Ji has written, that is in 85B. And as and when we come to the answer which he has given, we will also read the question from Senate's letter. So this is letter 85B, which begins, Mahatma Ji begins this letter as, at this stage of our correspondence, misunderstood as we generally seem to be, even by yourself, my faithful friend, it may be worth our while and useful for both that you should be posted on certain facts and very important facts connected with adaptation. Bear in mind then the following points. So these are some very important points. Before even answering his allegations of contradictions, Mahatma Ji wants to clarify to him certain facts connected with adeptship. He says, first of all, an adept, the highest as the lowest, is one only during the exercise of his occult powers. Take some time to reflect on this statement. An adept, the highest as the lowest, is one only during the exercise of his occult powers. Now, what do we understand by adept? Adept is a Siddha Purush. In Sanskrit or in Hindi, we say Siddha Purush. Adept is a master of some particular skill, some art or some science. Now, in theosophical literature, this term adept, it applies to a master of occult science. A master of occult science who selflessly works for the welfare of humanity. He is an adept. There are adepts of the Black Brotherhood also. Okay, so they are selfish. They work for selfish ends. But here we are talking about master of occult science who selflessly work for welfare of humanity. And HPP has mentioned in her talks that every adept is not always an initiate. We have heard this term about initiation. Okay, I'll tell you if there is some time. So every adept is not an initiate, but every initiate, he must be an adept in occultism before being initiated in the greater mysteries. So adept need not be an initiate necessarily, but initiate has to be an adept, meaning he has to be a master of occult science Only then he can be initiated into the greater mysteries. Therefore, one can think of those who have been initiated as the higher adepts. The high adepts are initiates of various degrees. HPB tells us that there are 7 degrees of adepts. Okay, and the initiations that are there for these high adepts, they are marked by the spiritual evolution, by the expansion of consciousness to higher planes, and teachings and trainings in specific aspects of occult science and the esoteric philosophy. So all these things, they decide or they mark the level of evolution of the adept, and the initiations are based on it. If you remember what theosophy, what we have studied in theosophy about initiation, the first, second, and third initiations, the candidate is developing his buddhic consciousness. Then in the fourth initiation, his consciousness is able to touch the nirvanic plane. Then he keeps on progressing, and it takes 7 lives between the first and the fourth initiation. Okay, from buddhic consciousness to nirvanic consciousness, it takes 7 lives, and it is the fifth initiation which makes the adept. He becomes a perfected man, or the Jivan Mukt. So he is liberated from the cycle of reincarnation. But after that, his evolution continues. It doesn't stop. And that is where HPB says that there are 7 degrees of adept. So at 5th initiation, he becomes an adept and then continues to the 7 degrees of adeptship. So Mahatma Ji is clarifying here that any adept, high or low, he is an adept only during the exercise of his occult power. What does this mean? It means that only when he focuses his consciousness on the buddhic or nirvanic plane, because then at that time he will be able to exercise his occult powers. If his consciousness is not focused on the higher planes, then he is at a lower plane, just like any other man. Okay, these occult powers which he can exercise, they are nothing but the siddhis. Siddhis, that is the Sanskrit word. Now, second point which Mahatma Ji mentions is, whenever these powers are needed, the sovereign will unlock the door to the inner man. Now, obviously, Mahatma Ji is speaking about the occult spiritual powers, and sovereign means the supreme man or the real man. From Constitution of Man, we know the 7 principles. So the supreme or the real man, that is called the sovereign. And the inner man, he is the adept. Okay. So Mahatma Ji says that the sovereign will unlock the door to the inner man, the adept, who can merge and act freely, but on condition that his jailer, the outer man, will be either completely or partially paralyzed, as the case may be. So this outer man, who is he? He is the physical body, the personality through which this our lower mind or the concrete mind is working. That is called as the jailer. The inner man is the adept. It is the higher principles. And they are imprisoned in this personality. That is why this personality is the jailer. For the adept to be able to work, the personality needs to be paralyzed. Okay. So Mahatma Ji says that either, now what things should be paralyzed so that the inner adept can work? The first, either mentally and physically. So mentally again refers to the lower mind, the concrete mind. Concrete mind and the physical body, it needs to be paralyzed. Only then adept can work. Or second, mentally but not physically. Or third one, physically but not entirely mentally. And then, okay, there is one more. The fourth one, neither. Neither is paralyzed, neither the body nor the mind, but with an Akashic film interposed between the outer and the inner man. Now, to understand all these points, you should have a very good idea about the septenary constitution of man. Okay, so here this Akashic film interposed between the outer and inner man. This is like compartmentalizing the higher self and the lower self. That means the higher self will continue to work as an adept, and the lower self will not matter. It will continue to do its normal things, okay, like a day-to-day person. So these are the 4 ways in which the occult powers they can be used by the adept. Now, the smallest exercise of occult power then, as you will now see, requires an effort. For the adept to use his occult power, it requires an effort. What is that effort? That effort is to focus the consciousness on the higher planes. Those 4 points which we have already seen in the last one. Okay. So focusing that consciousness, it requires effort. We may compare it to the inner muscular effort of an athlete preparing to use his physical strength. As no athlete is likely to be always amusing himself at swelling his veins in anticipation of having to lift a weight, so no adept can be supposed to keep his will in constant tension and the inner man in full function when there is no immediate need for it. Now, this is very plain here. Mahatmaji gives a very good example, like a sports person or an athlete who is preparing for a long distance run, or maybe who is preparing to lift a heavy weight. So what he will do, he will flex his muscles, his veins will be strained, and he will prepare to lift that weight using his muscular strength. Okay. But while he is not going to lift the weight, he can always relax. No need to tense his muscles. Right. So similarly, that an adept, it cannot be supposed that the adept is always keeping his will, the willpower, the higher will, okay, in constant tension, and the inner man, that is his spiritual principles, in full function. It is not the case always, okay, when there is no necessity for it, meaning if he doesn't have to exercise any occult powers, then there is no need for him to keep his will in constant tension and the inner man in full function. He can relax, he can just work and be like an ordinary man. Second point, when the inner man rests, the adept becomes an ordinary man. Now mark here what Mahatmaji mentions. When the inner man rests, the adept becomes an ordinary man, limited to his physical senses and the functions of his physical brain, just like a common man. Okay. Inner man is like the higher principles. The higher principles are what? The higher manas, the buddhi, atma buddhi manas, which is our higher, which is the ego. Now, when the personality is subdued, then the adept consciously works through his higher principles. Okay. And this habit, because an adept will constantly, if he's exercising his occult powers, then he's subduing his personality and he will work through his higher principles. So this habit, it sharpens the intuition in the latter, meaning when he becomes an ordinary man, in that ordinary man also, the adept will have a heightened intuition. Okay. But those, he will not become super sensuous. As an ordinary man, he will still use his physical senses, not the spiritual senses. Spiritual senses are the super sensuous. Okay. So what this means that as an ordinary man, the intuition of the adept is sharpened, but he still functions through his 5 physical senses and not the spiritual senses. Although the inner adept is ever ready, he is ever on the alert, and that suffices for our purpose. So Mahatma KH has clearly explained how an adept functions. See, often people carry this impression that adepts are, of course, they are very high in evolution, much higher than what we are at current level. But they are not godlike. They can do everything, they know everything. This is the kind of impression people have. But Master says clearly it is not like that. Only when the higher faculties are being used, then they are exercising their occult power. Then their consciousness is focused on the higher planes. But when the higher faculties are at rest, then adepts are also men like us. It is only that it is true that they have touched the Buddhic plane. They have touched the Nirvanic plane. And perhaps ordinary people like us, we haven't touched. But once the adept comes down to this lower consciousness, he's just like an ordinary man. So this clarity Mahatmaji wants to give to Synod, okay? Because they have been accusing that Mahatmaji has made contradictions and errors in his teachings. So this is very important to understand how the adept functions. And in the last line, he's saying that the inner adept is ever ready. As soon as it is required or it is needed, the inner adept or the inner man, his inner principles, they can immediately reach that level, the higher level, where they can exercise their unfolded consciousness and the occult powers. So at the moment of rest, that means when the adept is resting, at the moment of rest, then his faculties are at rest also. When I sit at my meals or when I'm dressing, reading, or otherwise occupied, I am not thinking even of those near me. So masters also perform their daily tasks just like any ordinary person. And at that time, they are not using their occult powers. And Mahatmaji says that Jwalkul can easily break his nose to blood by running in the dark against a beam, as he did the other night, just because instead of throwing a film, he had foolishly paralyzed all his outer senses while talking to and with a distant friend. And I remained placidly ignorant of the fact I was not thinking of him, whence my ignorance. So Mahatmaji is giving us this example to show that Jwalkul hurt his nose, but the master was not aware. Why? Because at that time he was not exercising his occult power. He was not thinking of Jwalkul. So he was not aware of Jwalkul being hurt. Now Jwalkul was also exercising his occult power. He was talking to a distant friend by this occult method. And to be able to use his occult power for this communication, what Jwalkul did, so one of those four methods which Mahatmaji had outlined, he paralyzed all his physical senses. Okay. Consequently, that means the sense of hearing, of seeing, of smelling, of tasting, all those senses are paralyzed. So consequently, he hurt his nose by crashing into a beam. He could not see with his physical eyes the beam in the dark. And Mahatmaji says that instead of that, he should have brought an Akashic film between the outer man and inner man. But he didn't do that. He paralyzed his physical senses. So this thing, it goes on to show that to become an adept and to exercise occult powers, it requires a lot of training and a lot of practice. And the powers, they don't remain active all the time. Okay. Further, Mahatmaji says, from the aforesaid, you may well infer that an adept is an ordinary mortal at all the moments of his daily life, but those when the inner man is active. So only during those moments he is an adept, when the inner man is active. Otherwise, in daily life, he is an ordinary mortal. Maybe I will take one or two more slides, then we can stop for the translation. He tells Sinet, couple this with the unpleasant fact that we are forbidden to use one particle of our powers in connection with the eclectics, for which you have to thank your president and him alone, and that the little that is done is, so to say, smuggled in. And then, so here, smuggled in. So once again, we should not misunderstand what the Mahatmaji is saying. Mahatmas, they will never break the rules of the brotherhood. That is not meant by to smuggle in. But whatever little is possible in terms of using the spiritual power, the higher occult powers, whatever little is possible, that Mahatma KH was doing for the sake of Sinet. And he had to thank Hume, the kind of attitude Hume had and his nature, his behavior, how it was. Due to that, use of the spiritual power had been forbidden. So that's why the letters were now being sent through post or through chelas. They could not be precipitated because precipitation is again an occult phenomena. So due to these reasons, Sinet could well conclude that KH, when writing to us, is not an adept. A non-adept is fallible, meaning he is liable to make mistakes. Therefore, KH may very easily commit mistakes. Mistakes of punctuation that will often change entirely the whole sense of a sentence. Idiomatic mistakes very likely to occur, especially when writing as hurriedly as I do. Mistakes arising from occasional confusion of terms that I had to learn from you, since it is you who are the author of rounds, rings, earthly rings. You see, even the vocabulary was not fixed. That was also a point of confusion. And most of these errors, as you see, the punctuation, the idiomatic phrases, the sentences, these are all syntactical errors, grammatical mistakes. They are not mistakes in the doctrine, in the semantics. Okay. So the syntactical errors, they cannot be construed as contradictions in the messages or the teachings which the master had given. So with this, today we will conclude the session for today. And I will request Meenakshi ji to give us the translation in Hindi.
नमस्ते, थैंक यू सिस्टर। आज हम लेटर नंबर 83, 84, 85 ले रहे हैं। लेटर नंबर 83 का बैकग्राउंड यह है कि यह पत्र द थियोसॉफिस्ट में लिखे डब्ल्यू ऑक्सले के लेख पर ज्वालपुल द्वारा लिखा हुआ फुटनोट है, जिसका उल्लेख हम लेटर नंबर 82 में पाते हैं। ऑक्सले एक अंग्रेज थे जिन्होंने फिलोसॉफी ऑफ स्पिरिट नामक किताब लिखी थी, जिसकी समीक्षा ज्वालपुल ने द थियोसॉफिस्ट में की थी। ऑक्सले ने समीक्षा में कही गई कुछ बातों पर आपत्ति जताई और प्रतिकार में KH के साथ अपनी मुलाकात का दावा किया। लेटर नंबर 83 में उल्लेखित 3 पासवर्ड्स के बारे में इस पत्र में बताया नहीं गया है, लेकिन महात्मा द्वारा लिखे गए क्रोनोलॉजिकल लेटर नंबर 96 में उसका उल्लेख किया गया है। वे कहते हैं कि ऐसा हो सकता है कि हमारे अपने प्रयोजन के लिए मीडियम्स और उनके स्कूप्स को न केवल महात्मा गणों की भूमिका निभाने का स्वातंत्र्य देते हैं, बल्कि हमारी लिखावट की नकल करने का भी हम स्वातंत्र्य देते हैं। इसे ध्यान में रखें और लंदन में इसके लिए तैयार रहे। जब तक संदेश या संवाद या जो भी कुछ हो, उसके पहले किंत आन नालांदा धार रानी यह 3 शब्द न हो, तब जान ले कि यह मैं नहीं हूं और न ही मेरी ओर से है। लेटर नंबर 83 में ज्वालपुल लिखते हैं, मेरे प्रिय मास्टर, जिन्हें भारत और पश्चिमी देशों में कुथुमी लाल सिंह के नाम से जाना जाता है, उन्होंने मुझे यह आदेश दिया है कि मिस्टर डब्ल्यू ऑक्सले द्वारा कुछ वक्तव्य के जवाब में और जिसे थियोसॉफिस्ट में प्रकाशित होने के लिए उन्होंने भेजा है, उस पर उनके नाम से निम्नलिखित घोषणा करो, यानी मास्टर के एच के नाम से घोषणा करो। उक्त सज्जन ने यानी ऑक्सले ने यह दावा किया कि मेरे मास्टर के एच ने 3 बार सूक्ष्म रूप से यानी एस्ट्रल फॉर्म में उनसे मुलाकात की है और उनका मिस्टर ऑक्सले के साथ वार्तालाप हुआ। उन्होंने ऑक्सले को एस्ट्रल बॉडीज और उन अपने मायावी रूप की शरीर के साथ साथ दोनों छोर तक अपनी चेतना को बनाए रखने की अक्षमता के बारे में कुछ विवरण दिए थे। इसलिए मेरे मास्टर यह घोषणा करते हैं कि वर्णन किए गए समय पर मिस्टर ऑक्सले ने जिसे भी देखा होगा और बातचीत की होगी, वह ऑकल्ट वर्ल्ड में प्रकाशित पत्रों के लेखक कुथुमी के साथ नहीं थी। मेरे मास्टर को उक्त सज्जन की जानकारी होते हुए भी, जिन्होंने एक बार उन्हें अपने हस्ताक्षरित पत्र दिया था, जिससे उन्हें उनके परिचित होने का साधन दिया और उनके अंतःप्रज्ञा की शक्तियों और पश्चिमी शिक्षण की तहे दिल से प्रशंसा की, फिर भी उन्होंने उनसे कभी भी एस्ट्रल रूप में या अन्य किसी रूप में संपर्क नहीं किया। न ही कभी उन्होंने मिस्टर ऑक्सले के साथ कोई बातचीत की है, कम से कम उस प्रकार से नहीं जहां विषय वस्तु और विशेषण, स्थान और निष्कर्ष दोनों गलत थे। उक्त दावों के परिणाम स्वरूप, जिसकी पुनरावृत्ति हमारे कई थियोसॉफिस्ट को गलत फहमी में डाल सकती है, मेरे मास्टर ने निम्नलिखित प्रस्ताव जारी करने का निर्णय लिया है। अब से कोई भी मीडियम या सिर जो यह दावा करता है कि या तो उसके साथ मेरे मास्टर ने मुलाकात की है या बातचीत की है या उन्हें देखा है, तब उसे अपने दावे की पुष्टि करने के लिए अपने कथन के साथ साथ 3 गोपनीय शब्दों को जोड़ना होगा, जिसे मेरे सद्गुरु शिमला के इक्लेक्टिक थियोसॉफिकल सोसाइटी के संबंधित अध्यक्ष और उपाध्यक्ष मिस्टर एओ ह्यूम और मिस्टर एपी सिनेट को जाहिर करेंगे। जब तक वे इन 3 शब्दों को किसी मीडियम द्वारा सही रूप से दोहराया नहीं पाते हैं या इसी रूप में उनके आर्टिकल्स या कथन की शुरुआत चाहे उनके द्वारा हो या उनके लिए कोई और मौखिक रूप से या छापित रूप से हो, यदि ऐसा नहीं होता है तब वह दावा अहेतुक कल्पना मानी जाएगी और उसकी ओर ध्यान नहीं दिया जाएगा। दुर्भाग्य से हाल ही में इस तरह की गलतफहमी काफी आम हो गई है और इसकी शीघ्रता से खबर लेनी होगी। इसलिए अफसोस से मेरे मास्टर यह कदम उठाने के लिए मजबूर हुए। उपरोक्त घोषणा और वक्तव्य को मिस्टर ऑक्सले के प्रकाशित वक्तव्य के साथ फुटनोट के रूप में जोड़ा जाना चाहिए, ऐसा ज्वालकुल मास्टर का आदेश है। आगे का लेटर नंबर 84 है, जो मास्टर उन परिस्थितियों का वर्णन करते हैं जिनके तहत लेटर्स का एक पैकेज सीनेट के घर पहुंचाया जाएगा। इसका बैकग्राउंड ऐसा है कि महात्मा के एच के चेलाओं में से एक ग्वाला देव का रहस्यमयी नाम या गोपनीय नाम दर्भगिरी नाथ था, लेकिन एक अन्य व्यक्ति जो महात्मा के एच के प्रोबेशनरी चेला थे, उनसे भी इसका अनोखा संबंध है, जिन्हें बाबाजी या बाबाजी के नाम से जाना जाता है। इस बहुत ही अजीब स्थिति को दामोदर ने 7 के में समझाया है। इस पत्र के लिखे जाने के दौरान और शायद इसके संबंध में महात्मा के एच ने 2 चेलाओं को शिमला स्थित सीनेट को भेजना चाहा। उन्होंने अपने शिष्य ग्वाला के देव, जो संभवतः एक तिबेटी थे, और आर केशव पिल्लई, जो नेल्लोर के एक पुलिस इंस्पेक्टर थे और जो एक प्रोबेशनरी चेला थे, जिन्हें चंद्रकुशो के नाम से जाना जाता था, इन दोनों को चुना। चंद्रकुशो यह नाम महात्मा केच ने उन्हें दिया था। अब हम लेटर की तरफ आते हैं कि मास्टर कहते हैं कि आपके घर पत्र को एक युवा चेला दर्भगिरी नाथ और उनके सहचेला चंद्रकुशो द्वारा पहुंचाया जाएगा। उन्हें बिना बुलाए किसी के घर में प्रवेश करने की मनाही है। अतः मैं आपसे गुजारिश करता हूँ कि आप हमारे रीति रिवाजों को माफ कर दे और साथ ही उन्हें आपके नाम से निमंत्रण भेजें, या तो अभी के लिए यदि आप उन्हें निजी रूप से मिलते हैं और आपके घर पर किसी अजनबी से मिलने की जोखिम लिए बिना मिलते हैं, या शाम के वक्त या देर रात में मिलने का निमंत्रण दे। आपकी पत्नी उनमें से किसी को भी देखने पर जरा भी आपत्ति नहीं है। आपकी पत्नी को उनमें से किसी को भी देखने पर जरा भी आपत्ति नहीं है, लेकिन मैं उनसे यह विनती करता हूँ कि वह उन्हें संबोधित न करे, क्योंकि हमारे धार्मिक नियमों के अनुसार उन्हें अपनी माता और बहनों को छोड़कर किसी भी महिला के साथ बात करने की मनाही है, नहीं तो वे उन्हें बहुत ही उलझन में डालेगी। मैं उनसे प्रार्थना करता हूँ कि वे मेरी मान्यता और मेरे खातिर ऐसा करें। मैं आपकी मित्रता पर भी भरोसा करता हूँ कि आपके अलावा और कोई भी उनसे बात नहीं करेगा। मेरे प्रसिद्ध विरोधाभासों के उत्तर को आपके हाथों सौंपना और मिस्टर फर्न का इंटरव्यू लेना, यह उनका मिशन है और इसके अलावा उन्होंने कुछ भी नहीं करना चाहिए। यदि आपको मुझे कोई उत्तर भेजना है तो जब भी आप तैयार रहेंगे तब दर्भगिरी नाथ उसके लिए आएंगे। मैं आपसे विनम्र निवेदन करता हूँ कि मिस्टर ह्यूम को उनके ऊपर न ला दे। जब तक सब कुछ स्पष्ट न किया जाए तब तक यह न सोचे कि क्या हुआ है। उन्हें किसी भी पुरुष या महिला से हाथ मिलाने यानी किसी को छूने की मनाही है, लेकिन आप मेरे लिटिल मैन के साथ आपको जितना चाहे उतनी बातें करने के लिए आमंत्रित कर सकते हैं, बशर्ते आप विवेकशील हो। आगे के लेटर 85A और 85B है, जिनका कॉन्टेक्स्ट इस तरह है। यह 2 भाग वाला पत्र लेटर नंबर 84 के साथ था और सीनेट को महात्मा KH के 2 चेलाओं ने यानी दर्भगिरी नाथ और चंद्रकुशो इन्होंने सौंपा था। ह्यूम और सीनेट दोनों ने महात्मा पर उन्हें मिथ्याभास में डालने का आरोप लगाया था। महात्मा KH ने उन्हें कई बार प्रश्नों की सूची बनाने के लिए कहा था, क्योंकि उनके पास अपने द्वारा लिखे गए सभी पत्रों को दोबारा खोजने का समय नहीं था। आखिर सीनेट ने सूची बनाई और उसे महात्मा KH को भेज दिया, जिसका उत्तर महात्मा लेटर नंबर 85 द्वारा सितंबर के महीने में देते हैं। लेटर नंबर 85A में सीनेट द्वारा सूची शामिल है और लेटर नंबर 85B में महात्मा के उत्तर है। हम लेटर नंबर 85B में आते हैं, जिसमें मास्टर कहते हैं कि आम तौर पर हमें गलत समझा जाता है। मेरे निष्ठावान मित्र, हमारे बीच के पत्राचार के इस चरण में आप भी हमें गलत समझते हैं। सिद्धत्व से जुड़े कुछ तथ्य और जो बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण तथ्य है, उन्हें आपको दिए जाने चाहिए, जो हम दोनों के लिए उपयुक्त और उपयोगी हो सकते हैं। इसलिए निम्नलिखित बातों को ध्यान में रखें। उच्चतम से लेकर निम्नतम सिद्ध पुरुष केवल अपनी सिद्धियों के प्रयोग के दौरान ही होता है। जब भी इन सिद्धियों की आवश्यकता होती है, तब सर्वोच्च इच्छा शक्ति उच्च तत्व यानी इनर मैन या सिद्ध पुरुष की ओर द्वार खोलती है, जो उभर कर स्वतंत्र रूप से कार्य कर सकता है, लेकिन इस शर्त पर कि उसका जेलर यानी बंदिस्त करने वाला यानी उसका व्यक्तिमत्व या आउटर मैन या तो पूरी तरह से या आंशिक रूप से अकार्यक्षम हो जाए। इस मामले में जो आवश्यकता है वह यह है कि या तो मानसिक और शारीरिक रूप से या मानसिक रूप से लेकिन शारीरिक रूप से नहीं, या शारीरिक रूप से लेकिन पूरी तरह मानसिक रूप से अकार्यक्षम नहीं, लेकिन भौतिक मनुष्य उच्च तत्व के बीच आकाशिक फिल्म प्रविष्ट करने के सिवाय इनमें से कोई भी नहीं। जैसे कि आप अब देखेंगे कि छोटे से छोटी सिद्धियों के प्रयोग के लिए प्रयास करने की आवश्यकता होती है। इसकी तुलना हम अपनी शारीरिक शक्ति का उपयोग करने की तैयारी कर रहे एक खिलाड़ी के अंदरूनी मांसपेशियों के प्रयास से कर सकते हैं। वजन उठाने के उत्साह में जैसे कोई भी एथलीट हमेशा अपनी नसों को फुलाता नहीं है, वैसे ही कोई भी सिद्ध पुरुष जब तक बहुत जरूरी न हो, उन्हें अपनी इच्छा शक्ति को निरंतर तनाव में रखने की और उच्च तत्वों को पूर्णतः कार्यरत रखने की आवश्यकता नहीं है। जब उच्च तत्व विश्राम में होते हैं, तब एक सिद्ध पुरुष एक साधारण मनुष्य बन जाता है, जो अपनी शारीरिक इंद्रियों और मस्तिष्क के कार्यों तक सीमित हो जाता है। अभ्यास से उनकी अंतर्ज्ञान की शक्ति यानी अंतःप्रज्ञा तेज हो जाती है, फिर भी उन्हें अतीन्द्रिय नहीं बना पाती। अंतस्थ सिद्ध पुरुष सदैव तैयार रहता है, सदैव सतर्क रहता है, और यह हमारे उद्देश्यों के लिए पर्याप्त है। इसीलिए विश्राम के क्षणों में उनकी शक्तियां भी विश्राम पर होती है। जब मैं भोजन करने के लिए बैठता हूँ या जब मैं कपड़े पहन रहा होता हूँ, पढ़ रहा होता हूँ या किसी अन्य काम में व्यस्त होता हूँ, तब मैं अपने आसपास के लोगों के बारे में नहीं सोचता और ज्वालकुल अंधेरे में खंबे से टकराकर अपनी नाक को चोट पहुंचाकर खून निकाल सकते हैं, जैसे कि पिछली रात उन्होंने किया था, केवल इसी कारण कि एक दूरस्थ मित्र से बात करते समय उन्होंने एक आकाशिक फिल्म रखने के बजाय अनजाने में अपने बाहरी इंद्रियों को निष्क्रिय बना दिया और मैं इस तथ्य से पूरी तरह अनभिज्ञ रहा। ऊपर दर्शाई गई बातों से आप अच्छी तरह से अनुमान लगा सकते हैं कि एक सिद्ध पुरुष अपने दैनंदिन जीवन में एक साधारण नश्वर व्यक्ति होता है, सिवाय उन क्षणों में जब उच्च तत्व कार्य कर रहे होते हैं या कार्यशील हो। इसे कटु तथ्य के साथ जोड़े कि हमें इक्लेक्टिक के संबंध में अपनी शक्तियों के एक अंश का भी उपयोग करने से मना किया गया है, जिसके लिए आपको अपने प्रेसिडेंट मिस्टर ह्यूम को और केवल उन्हें ही धन्यवाद देना होगा। और हमने जितना थोड़ा बहुत किया है, ऐसा कह सकते हैं कि यह स्मगल इन किया है, और उसके बाद ऐसा निष्कर्ष निकाला जाता है कि KH जब हमें लिखते हैं तब वे एक सिद्ध पुरुष नहीं होते हैं। जो सिद्ध पुरुष नहीं होते हैं वे त्रुटिपूर्ण होते हैं, इसलिए KH बहुत ही आसानी से गलतियां कर सकते हैं। विराम चिन्हों की गलतियां जो अक्सर वाक्य के पूरे अर्थ को पूर्णतः बदल देती है, खासकर जब मैं जल्दबाजी में लिखता हूँ, तब व्याकरण संबंधी गलतियां होने की संभावना है। कभी कभार पारिभाषिक शब्दों के उलझन से उत्पन्न होने वाली गलतियां जो मुझे आपसे सीखनी पड़ी, चूंकि आप ही राउंड्स, रिंग्स, अर्थली रिंग्स इत्यादि के लेखक हैं। थैंक यू। नमस्ते।
Thank you, Meenakshi ji, for this translation. This was very well done. And now our session is open for any question answers. If anybody would like to share something or ask something, you can please unmute and speak.
In fact, people can also mention it on the chat if they cannot unmute and speak. So we will take up questions from the chat and try to answer at least 1 or 2 questions today, because we have already crossed the time limit. So at least 1 or 2 we can take up Vivaji today, and maybe in the next part 2 you can take up more question and answer, if that is okay with you.
Yes, no problem.
Yeah. So anyone wants to ask a question, we'll only take up questions.
In fact, in the last session, there was a question by Brother Sharma ji from Ujjain. I think it has been answered today.
Yes, it is answered.
Thank you.
Madam, one more small question.
Yes.
What is the situation under which they are in ordinary mortals at all moments? This I could not follow.
So Mahatma KH has mentioned that when they are not exercising their occult powers, then they are like any ordinary mortal. And when they don't make use of these occult powers, when they are not focusing their consciousness on the higher planes, always they don't have to focus on the Buddhic plane or on the Nirvanic plane. In the normal waking consciousness, they use their normal physical body and the physical senses. So at that time, they are not like an adept. They are just like any ordinary person. Only when consciousness is raised to the higher planes, they can use the occult powers, and at that time, they are an adept. Any question? Any
Okay, madam. Thank you.
Most welcome.
I am adding one thing.
Yes, Pradeep ji, namaste.
Namaste. Actually, this is written in one of books relating to Krishnamurti. Actually, when Krishnamurti it is written by not by Krishnamurti, relating to Krishnamurti, Brother P. Krishna, now rector of Rajghat, he wrote that book Silver in Jewel Plaster, Jewel Platter of something like that. So he mentioned it is a interstate discussion between Achyut Patavardhan and P. Krishna. In that book, there is a chapter, interstate discussion between Achyut Patavardhan and Professor P. Krishna. Achyut Patavardhan says, I quote, that when that power, the power of the consciousness of Lord Maitreya, is within the Krishnamurti, the teachings flow from him. The teachings Krishnamurti for last 60 years, he spread throughout the world as a world teacher. It is the teachings of Lord Maitreya. So that consciousness, when it is with the Krishnamurti, so he explains everything. But when it was not there, he's just like an ordinary man. He can argue with another person. Even in one of the contest, he said, I am your president. I cannot have power like this. So it is a discussion between Patavartan and so same thing. It is in the case of masters. When they are not using occult powers, they are ordinary persons. They use like they are taking food, moving in a different directions in their ashrams. Like this. One kind of an example I am giving relating to Jai Krishna.
Right.
Okay.
Very nice example.
Oh, it
Thank you for
means,
sharing it.
It means, sir, it means they are living in Shambhala as mortal men.
No, not in Sambala. You know why? Why Sambala is the headquarters of Maitreya or Sanat Kumar? We don't know. We don't have any idea whether they are having उनका physical body है कि नहीं है. But a physical body like our sort, it is very simple thing. But our Mahatmas are very much available in a Tibet. Last, they are very near to last, and so they are there.
Yes, in many letters we come across Mahatma Ji mentions that he has been riding on horseback for so many days from one place to another monastery. So all those things he's mentioning. Anything else? No? Then I think, Subralina, we can conclude the session today and we'll continue in the next session.
You may do the prayer and I'll close the session.
Should I do the prayer? Okay. All right. Please join me for this closing prayer. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Lokaha Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you all. Thank you, Vibhaji. So see you again tomorrow in the, not tomorrow, Sunday session. And the next part of this Mahatma letters, we would continue on Fridays. Thank you.